Alrighty. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Midlife Mojo Mondays 2021 version, I guess, right? Our second one of the year. And for those of you who are new to Midlife Mojo Mondays, every Monday I go live here. I always say the 2 p.m. ish hour. For those of you who are used to me, you're like, oh my gosh, she's on time today. But I always get on right around 2 o'clock Eastern time just to share some education or some motivation or maybe a demonstration or doing something like today where I'm going to bring on a new guest, a special guest. And this year, I've told you that my vision for the Midlife Mojo brand is to be the #1 resource, support, and education center for women over 40. So you're going to see on these Midlife Mojo Mondays me bringing on more guests just to share is valuable to to you all for the midlife woman, whether it's for your health and wellness, whether it's for your maybe your career and business life, your relationships, your personal growth, whatever it is, right? Because midlife mojo means finding your magic. And so that's what this and so I'm really excited today to bring on my first guest here today. She, whether she's all about finding your story. And so before I read her bio a little bit, she's all about finding and writing your story. And as midlife women, we all have a story. We can't have gotten this far in life without one. And so writing is a very powerful tool, I feel, for releasing some things. And you just never know when you put your ideas down and you release things where it may lead. So I've got Pat coming on. I'm going to, as I said, read her bio in just a minute, but she's going to talk about, the end result being a book today. And so if some of you are thinking, oh, book, no, that's not me, not interested in reading a book or writing a book, be more open-minded than that. Okay. Be more open-minded because you just never know in this new era of life what takes you. Sometimes just sharing your story takes you somewhere else. So my special guest today, Pat Iyer, has written or edited 49 books since 1986. Her most recent book is 52 Writing Tips, Fast and Easy Ways to Polish Your Writing, which is available on Amazon. She has been a member of the Narrators Association since 2008. She's a co-host of the new NSA Authors Group. And people with a burning desire to write a book hire Pat as a book coach, editor, and ghostwriter. Claiming snowbird status, Pat lives in Florida in the winter and in rural New Jersey in the summer. So let me bring on Pat for us all here. Hold on. There she is.
Thank you, Jill. It is such a pleasure to be here and to see your guests. And hello to Aurora, who has joined us. Delightful to be here.
Yes. Well, oh, there she is. I had my thing covered up. I didn't even see you. Hey, Aurora. Wonderful. So, just real quick, I didn't even, when I was rereading that, you live in Florida. Does that mean you're in Florida right now in the winter?
It is. And that's exactly what it means.
So where, maybe you're close by. Where in Florida are you?
In Fort Myers.
Oh, you're on the other coast. That's my goal. When my daughter graduates in a couple of years, my goal is to get over to the other coasts of Florida. I love it over there. We get over there as often as possible. Well, wonderful. Well, welcome. So I am really excited to have you here today. I think just you coming on here and just introducing this new, so maybe for people, concept of how they can kind of get their story out a little bit and take some steps. It's going to be really, really helpful to them. I just want to say, I know for myself, you guys see my 2 books up there that I've written. And so this is why I brought Pat on, because if you had told me, that was 2018, I published my first, so 2 years ago. If you had told me 2.5 years ago that I would have even think about writing a book, I would have thought you were crazy. Like, that was never on my radar. That was never anything that was interesting to me. My husband has been the writer since we were in college, writing short stories, all of that. But, I had something to say. And so it just kind of came from there. So I'm excited for my audience to get to know you more and just kind of see what you can maybe pull out from them. And maybe, 2 years from now, a year from now, you guys will be sitting up there with books out there to share with the world. Who knows? So I want to say, we were reading your bio, Pat. You have been in this book business a long time, since 1986, right? So have you had a passion for books all along since a child? Have you, been writing books? Has that been something you've been doing?
I always enjoyed reading books. I was the kid who went to the library with my bicycle rack coming back full of books. My sister and I spent our summers reading as many books as the library would allow us to have at one time, which turned out to be 10 books you could take out at one time. And I enjoyed creative writing when I was in high school. While you were doing the introduction, I was thinking about how old I was when that first book came out in 1986. I was almost close to 40 at that point. I was 38 years old at the time that book came out. So, at least based on my experience, it's entirely possible to be at the point where your watchers are in your life and be thinking about what would it mean to you to write a book.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Absolutely. And I too, big library fan. Every summer I won the summer reading library yet. That was definitely me, how many I could get in the summer. So you and I, kindred spirits on that for sure. So, I was reading here that, that you also said that you do editing, ghostwriting. That was interesting to me. So how did you kind of go from somebody who just liked to read and write a little bit to actually getting into the other end of sides, helping other people with their book in that sense?
Well, there's all different kinds of models that you can follow when you're an author. You can co-author books with other people, which involves editing each other's material and giving each other feedback. You can write a book by yourself. You can be an editor, as I was on several books, where I went out and sought people who had particular expertise to write chapters for my books, and then I edited those chapters. You can work with other editors when the book gets large enough, usually about above 10 or 12 chapters. Then it's helpful to have somebody else who can act as an editor to reduce the workload and to help people through the process, because it's a fact of life, and I know that your listeners will recognize this behavior. There are some people who volunteer to do things, and then they get into the project and they say, oh, this is not something that I am ready to do right now. So part of the role of the editor is to be able to help people along, motivate them, keep them on track, keep them accountable. I played that role in several of my books. And then my first book enabled me to start working with attorneys as an expert witness. I built a very successful business and sold that company in January of 2015. And then began doing ghostwriting and editing after the point where I sold my company. So what I've been doing as a post-business owner has built on the skills that I developed all along in terms of editing people's work.
I love that. So I hope you ladies are hearing that, right? She's saying her first book came out when she was 38, right? And so it's right. She's been doing a lot of stuff, but it evolved, right? One thing led to something else, led to something else. You never know where your path is going to take you, but unless you take that first step, right? When I wrote my book, No Sweat, it had nothing to do. I wasn't working with midlife women exclusively. I didn't have my Midlife Mojo brand. I had just had an experience. I found a solution and I wanted to share. And it's evolved into this and it continues to. So I want you guys, ladies, just to hear, if you've got this kind of like thing in the back of your mind or a little something in your ear burning, a story, listen, because you don't have to see the end result or know that. You can just kind of follow. I love how you just kind of evolve. So I know you do primarily work with a lot of business people or more nonfiction writers, and the Midlife Mojo ladies here, there are those in here, but for primarily, that's not their avenue. So unlike myself, where I was maybe writing eventually for business, if for my little ladies who aren't ready for why would they want to write a book? Like, why would they even want to do that?
I've talked to a fair number of people who have overcome some significant challenges in their life. I say that if you're paying attention, life gives you lessons, and hopefully you don't get the same lessons over and over again. You learn painful lessons from your life experiences, whether that is overcoming a challenging marital relationship or walking away from an abusive relationship, as an example. Or one of the people who I worked with came to this country to escape an abusive husband and knew not a single person, in the United States when she arrived with her 2 children and had to make her way, had to find a place to live, had to figure out how to support herself and her children. Some people who have overcome challenging medical problems, what have they learned from those experiences? Being a parent of a kid with developmental needs or emotional problems is another whole category. One of the people I worked with wrote her book about her adult daughter who committed suicide. And she incorporated into the book portions from her daughter's diary and then told the same events from her perspective as a mother, superimposing her daughter's voice and her own voice. Some people are caught up in wanting to explore their family history. You know, for example, Jill, my mother came over on a ship from Ireland when she was a year old. My grandparents had a job. My grandfather had a job as a gardener in Pittsburgh. They traveled on a ship with 3 kids under the age of 6 to come through Ellis Island and into the United States. I would have loved if I think back now and think about the stories that were in my family, I would have loved to have written those down because all the people who could tell me those stories are no longer alive. And what it would have meant to our family to know, how does a British woman and an Irish man get on a ship and travel 2 weeks with 3 kids under the age of 6? How do they do that? And so those are some examples, family stories, challenges that you've overcome of a variety of natures. What experiences have you had that you've learned from, and what are the techniques that got you through those difficult times? What can you share that would help other people who are saying, you know, should I walk away from that abusive spouse? What do I say to my child who is in despair? How do I get the courage to deal with breast cancer, for example, common condition for women in their, particularly in their 50s and 60s, but it can start in the 40s. Those are the kinds of stories that I think give you an opportunity to give back and to share your painful lessons.
And you said something, you said, right, breast cancer, like a common story, but every story is different, right? And everybody's going to hear it different. So you think, oh, well, why does anybody want to read, my story on abuse or my story on suicide, right? There's so many things, and there's so many people who are better than me or, or more professional than me. But the truth is, and this is what I personally have learned, and it's the more that I've been sharing of myself, that the people who need to hear your story show up to listen to you, and they hear you, and they may have heard it from other people, but it didn't sync or they didn't connect. So everybody has, that was something I think that, people should realize that, think about what your story is. Your story means something to somebody out there, without a doubt. So I loved those examples, and I love that book where you mentioned she used her voice, the superimposed of both of them. I think I was thinking about that. I'm like, that's a really powerful way of telling a story too. And talking about working with an editor or somebody, and I self-published and self-edited, but I could see the power in working with somebody outside who's in that field who can maybe structure something like that. Like I would have never thought to do something like that. And so to have somebody with guidance to help you figure out how you want to present your book to the world is even a really interesting thing. So, what are some things I'm sure some of you, if you're listening, you're like, okay, like I was just saying, that's great, Jill, you're you, and you can get up there and you can put yourself out there, but that's not me, or people listen to you because you've got this credential or that credential. So that's a lot of limiting beliefs for people. So what have you seen or heard, like in your world, when someone is either said they can't write a book or they want to? What are some of the things that you have seen that have held people back from really taking that leap, or that they've said to you?
Probably the biggest one is perfectionism, Jill, and a rather evil quality that sits on my shoulder every now and then and whispers in my ear, you need to do this a little bit better. You need to edit this a little bit more thoroughly. Perfectionism is often tied with, am I good enough? I have to be absolutely perfect. in order to release something. There's a woman whose book I edited who described how she was up on the top of a mountain. She was 34. Her husband was 39. They were picking up the husband and the son who had been attending a Boy Scout camp. And her husband clutched his chest and died on the top of the mountain, 45 minutes away from the nearest town. The ambulance came. There was nothing they could do. She tried doing CPR. They couldn't bring him back. And she wrote her story about what it was like to suddenly be a widow and have to deal with all of the paperwork, all of the arrangements. How do you get the body off of the mountain? How do you arrange for a cremation? What about the bank accounts? I mean, all of this. She wrote this book 15 years ago, and it sat on her hard drive for 15 years. She was afraid to release it. She was afraid to be judged. She was afraid that it wasn't good enough. And it stands, actually. I happen to have it in my hand. I'll put it in front of my camera. She released it about a year ago to give guidance to people. It's called You Don't Get a Map, You Get a Compass, to guide people who are dealing with the same thing. Because quite honestly, when I was 34, it would never have occurred to me that my husband could suddenly die. Now, he is 8.5, 9 years older than I am, but still, I mean, he was in his mid-40s at the time. She ended up losing her husband. And so many people could have benefited from her experience in that last 15 years. Her friends, who was a professional editor, said, you know, you really ought to get this edited. And that person came to me, and I took on the job and helped her with her language and reframing and reorganizing information a little bit. And now the book is out there, and she is a speaker. She's talking to groups about her experience, probably talking to midlife women and saying to them, hey, this could happen to you at any time. You need to be prepared.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can see, right? Like how many of you ladies out there maybe have some kind of burning desire, passion, whether it's writing a book or writing a piece of music, or I don't know what your dream might be, but something that you've got that you kind of have put in a drawer somewhere for 15 years, right? So maybe not be something tangible in a drawer, but it's a dream that you've put away in a drawer, right? And now is the time to pull that dream out and figure out what you're going to do with it, because there are people out there that are waiting for your message, right? Waiting to hear from you. And that may not be on a global scale of, putting it out there. It just may be your neighbor, right? It just may be, that's one thing I discovered when I put out my book. That's why I decided to go into this working with midlife women, because I had multiple friends start calling me and writing, and a lot of things going on in their marriages that I would have never known, a lot of stuff, all because of the hormonal stuff, because I was willing to. So you don't know what you're going to do. And so I think when you were saying that she was afraid about being judged, I think as midlife women, right, maybe we're not as comfortable in our appearance or things like that, or want to get on in any way just to put ourselves out there in front of people. Just that whole, we've been kind of put ourselves in the background. We've let maybe our spouse and our children shine, and now we don't even know how to make ourselves shine. So I love this concept of getting your kind of story out, but don't let it sit in a drawer, and find that help, find somebody. For that lady, it took a friend saying, hey, go do this. I hope for you guys that you can maybe do that for yourself. So what kind of personal transformations, that kind of leads into that? What kind of personal transformations do you see happen when people do go through this book writing process? Because I know that I'm a different person than I was a couple of years ago writing a book, for sure, And so what kind of personal, because you have to, right? You have to get over all those things to pull that book out of the drawer and show it. There's a lot you have to go through. So what are some personal transformations, or what do you see how people change during their process of writing a book?
They have to go through the first thought process, Jill, which is to go from 0 to 1. It's the hardest part. You move from being not an author to being an author. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your message. You have to believe that other people are interested in what you have to say. One of the things that I recommend is getting together like a cheering group of people who are likely to want to read your book, whether you're writing for example, let's take the breast cancer example. If you're writing for women in your age group who are worried about breast cancer or maybe potentially have breast cancer or have had it, and they've got questions. What about the self-care? How did you get through this? How do you deal with the changes in your body image? I'm a nurse, so this is an example that comes easy to me. I've taken care of people when they've been wheeled out of the recovery room, fresh from surgery. And I've seen people go through treatment. So if you take that example, then are there people that you can use to be sounding boards? What questions do they have about the topic? And by talking to other people, it helps to form the material that you're going to cover in your book. Do you want, for example, coming out of that book to be to run a support group? There are a lot of support groups for women who've had breast cancer or are going through that treatment who teach women this is about living with breast cancer and getting through the treatment. This is not about dying from cancer. So I would say the biggest transformation, Jill, is to recognize that it's important that you share your story and you get out of your head what you know and into somebody's hands. And then it's like a magical thing. Oh, Jill, you wrote a book. You're automatically spoken with reverence. I edited a book that was a textbook for nurses who work with attorneys. People came up to me for 15 years when I was exhibiting at conferences, and they would say, "Oh, Pat, you wrote the Bible of legal nurse consulting." And I could see almost some of them were afraid to shake my hand. And I thought, you know, I'm just Pat. Well, yes, I was the chief editor, and I did recruit 8 editors, and they recruited 8 authors, and we put together a 54 chapter book, which is not what I recommend if you're a first time author. And it stood for over 10 years before the next edition came out. I could never have foreseen that people would approach me in a manner when I agreed to take on that project. You don't know what doors are going to open or what experiences that you'll have as a result of writing a book.
Yeah. And I think you have to grow as you go along. So I know, like the first time I was at the Young Living Convention, and that's where I released my book. And I had people wanting to take their picture with me. I'm like, your picture with me? Like, sure, like those memories just came up recently, or they wanted me to give them their autograph, and I was like that's, yeah, you got to do a little bit of whoa, like that's a lot of self-worth, or who am I, or like what, there's a lot that goes on. And so, and the more that you do that, and just that process of getting the story out and then getting the story out to the world is all a self-growth process. And I hope that my midlife ladies, we've got the time to do this now. We should take the time to grow ourselves. And hopefully maybe a book might be one of the ways that you can do that. So for these ladies who have been listening to you, you've shared some examples of some things that they can write about. Is there anything else, maybe another example that you haven't shared that you can think of? You gave a lot. But if not, if there's maybe a first tip that you can give them to get started. So if, Aurora's listening and she says, I do have this thing that I went through, and you know what, like I have always kind of wanted, people, whenever I tell them, it seems to like touch them in some way. Maybe I could help some other people, and my kids are grown now, and my husband's retired and he's driving me crazy. It'd be nice to have a little project or something like that. How could she, just get started, on your own? And I know you're going to just share with us, hopefully, a minute about your upcoming course, and I want you to do that. But just one tip, right now, if she wanted to start, that might help her.
I think it's to identify clearly who you want to write for. And once you identify that, what is your passion? One of the things that happens is that once you write that book, that subject, it stays with you a long time. The no sweat book behind you is with you for the rest of your life. So I recommend that you pick a topic that you're really passionate about. You'll be reading about it. You may be doing some additional research. You'll be looking for examples. You'll be talking to people to incorporate their stories into your book. It should be something that excites you and interests you. And once you identify that, then it's a question of figuring out, what are the topics that I want to cover in this book? What are the things that people really have questions about? We buy books because we have problems that we want to solve. Now, Jill, you and I may have read fiction when we were kids, and I still read. I have always, before I've gone to bed, for all of my life since I've learned how to read, have always read some fiction at the end of the day. But I would not necessarily say that fiction solves a problem. In my case, it helps me unwind and it entertains me, particularly when I read murder mysteries or mysteries about psychopathic people. At one point, Jill, I went through a phase where I got fascinated by sociopaths and psychopaths and the people who murder other people. I wanted to know why they turned out that way. What was in their background? Was it the way that they were raised? After a while, I got tired of the topic, and now I go back to fiction or romance. If you're looking at writing a book that will build on your experiences, then the key is, who are you writing for? And what problems are they coming to your book to solve? And that helps to identify the content.
Exactly. I see Aurora. Great points. Guide to beginning. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. If you don't know where you're going, or what you're doing, it's kind of even difficult to start. So fantastic. I love that so much. So Cher, I know that you are, you've got some things going on around helping people getting started and so forth. So share with us what you've got upcoming that maybe you could help somebody get going.
Sure. I have a course called Get Your Book Finished, and the emphasis is on the word finished because of my story I shared with you earlier. There's a tragic number of books that are sitting unfinished on people's hard drives. Oh, one day I'll get that book finished, or one day I will have the time, or one day when things are less crazy, and one day doesn't come. Writing a book is an act of discipline. It's identifying when you're most productive in your day. I'm most creative and sharp in the morning. In the evening, I'm better off doing some things that require less attention. Some people spend weekend time. Some people get up early in the morning before their family is awake and write. The key is to establish a pattern and put it on your schedule so that you commit to yourself that you're going to spend time. The course that I'm teaching is at the end of January, is the Kickstart Weekend, which covers a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's the last weekend of January 2021. And the focus is on getting your book started with my help over that weekend, when we identify the topic, the ideal audience, what are the other books competing with your idea that are on the market, what makes your book unique, what do you want to cover in the book. That type of guidance with my support is intended to get you started. And then we will meet every other Thursday for a session where I provide some more education, support, brainstorming, a group meeting did I say Wednesday? It's every other Thursday, starting in February, March, and April. The intent of this is to help you identify what you want to write about and get you started. I have some people who've taken longer than 3 months to write their books, depending on how much time they allocate in their lives. And the key is that they don't necessarily know who to turn to. When they are working in my course, through my course, they have that opportunity to brainstorm with me, as well as with the other students in the course, and then to do some one-on-one consulting with me when they get to the point where they've got questions or feel like they're getting stuck.
Wow. Well, That sounds, I gotta tell you, having done it on my own, gosh, yeah. I mean, you have like would have it all laid out, and to get it done in 3 months does take discipline, does take commitment, does take a plan, does take structure, does take all of that. And so it sounds like you're going to help people really take it from the drawer, to actually being hopefully finished within a very short period of time. So as I said, right, she's saying within a 3 to 4 month period, maybe a little bit longer. So no joke, your book could be on your shelf literally a year from now, which is a pretty amazing thing to think of. So is there, I'm going to put up in just a moment. I know you have a free gift for everybody. Maybe we'll share that and I'll put up the free gift. But also I want to make sure that they know how to get a hold, how they can get that 3-day event. Maybe you share that verbally right now. How can they
Sure.
sign up for that event?
The key is to go to patiyer.com. That's PATIYER.com. Jill and I were talking before we started about how tricky it is that a capital I looks a lot like a capital L. And I do want to remind you that I testified in court for 28 years. So can you imagine somebody saying, Pat Liar, would you raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth? Oh, please, that's a bad typo for my name. So it's Iyer, like in India, which is an Indian name. My husband came to this country when he was 21, and that's why I have an Indian last name.
Interesting. So good. And actually what I will do, ladies, for her 3-day event, I think you gave me a link to share. So I will share the link in the comments here for that 3-day event. And I'll definitely share it also in the Midlife Mojo page as well. I'll do a separate post for that, for the 3-day event. So for this, I'm going to put some on screen right now, but why don't you have a free gift for everybody just to enjoy right now for attending and watching. So I'm going to put up the information on the screen. Will you talk about it a little bit here?
Yeah, it's called Writing Rules and Wrongs. I compiled some information on common writing errors that are easy to fix. It is a quick digital download that you can get by going to this link, which is, again, a capital L. In this case, it's lnc.tips/WRAW for writing rules and wrongs. http://lnc.tips/WRAW. And by going to that, you'll get the download link and be able to open that up on your computer and check it out.
Fantastic. I totally am downloading that. I love that. Writing rules and wrongs. Gosh knows, I'm sure I break them all. Hey, Marie, I see you on there. You need to get this book out of your head and onto paper. And I don't know if you just tuned in, Marie, or you've been for a while, but I know that you mentioned something just opening, starting your own legal nursing business. And I heard Pat mentioned something how she wrote a book about the Bible on legal nursing consulting. So maybe it's good that you're listening. I don't know what your book on your mind is, Marie, at all, but I'm just connecting you two just a little bit because you happen to pop up.
Oh, great, Marie.
Yeah.
That's perfect. And I will give my email address also, Marie, in case you have questions. I have 28 years of experience as a legal nurse consultant. patriciaiyer@gmail.com. Again, spelled with a capital I. Looks like Marie knows my podcast that I've been doing for 4 years. So thank you for being a listener, Marie.
Awesome. Yay, that makes me so happy. Look at this. This is the small world stuff I love, right? Even on the internet in this big, huge world, it's amazing how we can be in a small world. So fantastic. So is there any last tips or anything you want to share before we kind of just close out today?
I think the biggest, Jill, is to not let the barriers that are stopping you actually keep you in your tracks. That if you're focused on, do I have enough time? Am I good enough? Will anybody want to read what I have to write? If I just perfect it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, then it'll be perfect. And then I can release it. There are people who need to know your message now, and you don't know who they are. They're out there in the world needing your hope or inspiration or your story or your knowledge. If you get past those barriers and then get your book in people's hands, you will never be able to anticipate the opportunities and the satisfaction, the excitement of having written your book.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. Well, I'm so grateful for those of you who have listened to Pat today, and Pat, for the amazing tips you've shared. I know that you are going to spark something in somebody. In a year from now, I'm going to see some of my Midlife Mojo ladies with books on their shelves too. And I think a large part of that is going to come from this conversation that you've sparked today. So ladies, I'm going to say goodbye to Pat. I'm going to just come on and wrap things up here on Midlife Mojo Mondays. But thank you again, Pat, for being here. Hang out there in the green room for me. I'll talk to you as soon as I'm done here.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. So, ladies, another Midlife Mojo Monday. We are wrapping up. Just a little bit of business, what's going on in my world. If you have not registered for my webinar, it is the 3 simple ways that midlife women can create lasting weight loss. And I did it yesterday a couple of times for the first time. I'm doing it again on Wednesday at 3 p.m. live and Thursday at 9 p.m. live. That's Eastern Standard Time. So midlifemojo4women.com/register. I think it's register webinar. You probably have seen the post. Go look for it. But definitely would love to have you on there. And just as always, thank you guys for supporting Midlife Mojo, coming on here live, supporting the guests as well. It encourages me to bring on more people so that we can all thrive in our midlife years. So I'm going to send you off if I can do this. Let's see with my little exit video here. There we go. So you all have a great, great week, and I will see you in